Haichka Osiama Sieya, Tansikia, Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank you all for being here today and showing support for the Palestinian community. I'm here as a hereditary chief from Treaty 8. My great-great-grandfather in 1899 signed Treaty 8 on behalf of our family and our nation. I would like to ask members of the indigenous community to please come up. If you're comfortable to do so. Also, my son is over here as well, so he's also up here with us. I'd like to thank my relatives for coming up here today. And I'm going to put a challenge to each and every one of us. There's 5 of us right now. We need to double that next week. We need to triple that, quadruple that. We need to get our relatives out here to support our Palestinian brothers and sisters who are being bombed in broad daylight. We, as a people, stood here about 2.5 years ago on this very spot, asking for the world to care about our children. And we said every child matters. Because they do. So as indigenous people, if we're going to ask for that kind of support, we need to give that kind of support back. So let's put that pressure on our communities, let's put that pressure on our families to get them out here. We need to be supporting our indigenous brothers and sisters around the world. And that's what Palestinians are. They are indigenous people to the land of Palestine. And what is happening to the Palestinians is nothing short of a genocide. Children are being bombed in broad daylight. They are being murdered in broad daylight before the world. And what is the world doing? Nothing. But we're here, and we're calling not just for the British Columbian government, but the Canadian government and all governments to bring a permanent ceasefire to the Palestinian people, to release the prisoners that are being held in Israeli prisons. They must be released. They must be released. I am a father to a young boy, 1 year, 1 month. Every time I hear about a Palestinian child being murdered, I think of my son, and I think of how I would feel if that was my child being murdered, or my child being buried in rubble. It's a travesty. And that's really, it shouldn't take that to get people out here, but I think that's what it's really got to take. Put yourself in the Palestinian shoes. How would you feel if it was your child in a pile of rubble? How would you feel if it was your child being targeted? Or your sister? Or your wife? Or your brother? Or your grandparents? Or your parents? How would you feel? You would be devastated. We should all be devastated. We should all be shocked and appalled when we see these actions happening. And we must do everything that we can to support the Palestinian community as they make this fight international. And we must make sure that it remains an international struggle. The Israeli government doesn't want us connected. They want us to think of our Palestinian relatives as different, other. But let me tell you something. We're indigenous people, and there are 750 million indigenous people right across the world. And it's time for us to stand up and unite as indigenous people. 750 million. Last year, I was blessed to have an opportunity to speak at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We called for a World Youth Advisory Council there. And I had a meeting with our ambassador to the United Nations, Mr. Bob Ray. I also met with Minister Mark Miller and Minister Patty Hadju. And I'm asking all 3 of them to come out in stern condemnation of the crimes that Israel is committing against the Palestinian people and to call for a permanent ceasefire. This is directly, specifically to Ambassador Ray. You told us in New York last year that if we made an appeal to you, that you would back it. So I'm personally asking you, call for an immediate ceasefire at the United Nations, Mr. Ray. I told all three of them that I would personally hold them to those words, that they would support whatever we asked them to support. So support this. Support a permanent ceasefire. Put your money where your mouth is. And if you don't act, then we will call for the Indigenous community to be out in the streets. We will call for our brothers and sisters to come out in full force to do what we need to do to help our Palestinian relatives. But I will say, peacefully. We're not about causing violence. We don't want violence. We want peace. But we will do what we must in order to support our Indigenous brothers and sisters in Palestine. Stop the bloodshed. Bring a permanent ceasefire now. Salam alaikum. Peace be upon you.